All right, y'all aren't ready for this. All right, let's get some nice lighting. Also, I was in my word this morning. What is this? This is April 15th. Not that that matters, anyways. But I was in my word. Nice ankles right there. I was in my word, and one of the things that I've been going over with some boys from my CG at Salt is a book called Unwanted Sexual Behaviors, and going through that and looking at purity. But more than that, just looking at the design and the beauty of what God has called us to live in. So I was thinking about, okay, what is the beauty? What are some characteristics? What are some words that I can think about and get Bible verses on, or just get straight facts from the Bible on, to encourage myself, to remind myself of the truth about these different things so I can walk them out, and also remind myself of these verses, which is the truth of God. So I had like a couple of them down. I had the identity that he gives us, love, power, peace, and self-control, and I have these different verses down. But one of the verses that I've been going over, and that's been really helping me to combat lust and to really just gain self-control in a lot of areas, whether it's pride, whether it is lust, whether it is my thoughts, was 2 Corinthians 10:3-6. So it talks about having the divine power to demolish strongholds, and divine power to demolish strongholds, and talking about the weapons that we are waging war with, not the weapons that the world is waging war with. How those weapons have divine power to destroy strongholds, and how we take every thought captive and make it obedient to the Lord, and also about demolishing every argument and precipice that stands against the knowledge of God. There's a lot of order, but anyways, as I was going through that, I was like, okay, divine power, weapons. And I asked myself, what are these weapons? And I was like, okay, let's look it up. So I went on Enduring Word and typed in 2 Corinthians 10:3-6, the meaning of all that, and a good amount of things popped up. But I was reading through it, and Enduring Word just gave reference, like Ephesians 6, I believe, where Paul is talking about the belt of truth, breastplate of righteousness, shoes of the gospel, helmet of salvation, shield of faith, and the sword of the Spirit. And I was like, bet, I know those. But the further context that Enduring Word gave was that in that context, the Corinthian Christians, instead of using the spiritual weapons, which are again truth, righteousness, faith, the spirit of the sword of the Spirit, the shoes of the gospel, and salvation, they were using cardinal weapons. So instead of truth, they were manipulating people. Instead of righteousness, they were pursuing an image of success. Instead of faith, they were using perceptions of power. Instead of salvation, they were lording over authority. Instead of the shoes of the gospel, they were using their smooth words. And lastly, the one I want to focus on was this: instead of using the sword of the Spirit, they were using human schemes and programs. And the sword of the Spirit, growing up, I was like, cool, lit. I don't necessarily know what that means in context, or don't necessarily know how that plans out in my life. But as I read that, and as the sword of the Spirit relates or contrasts to human schemes and programs, I was like, Lord, what you trying to say? And he was like, Patrice, the sword of the Spirit as it relates to human schemes and programs is the Spirit moving and guiding my steps in my path. And I was like, yo. So the sword of the Spirit has been in my hand, and the sword of the Spirit has been guiding me and leading me this entire time. He got me to done college. He got me through some depressing moments in my life. It got me through a lot of struggles. It was the one that was guiding me towards digital marketing. It was the one that was guiding me towards some internships. It was the one that was guiding me to different people. It was the one that was guiding my steps in the involvement that I've got involved in, whether it's the organizations that I've been involved in, the Mount Retreat, Cabify, Doulos, Salt, the sword of the Spirit, instead of human schemes and human programs, it's the, I don't want to say schemes of the Spirit, but it's the plan of the Spirit and the program of the Spirit of God. And I wanted to share that with you because I don't know who's watching. I don't really care. But the sword of the Spirit, ooh, ooh. Y'all ready for this? All right. Here's the image that came up to my mind. Do you know like how people have machetes? And I think of like these adventurers that have machetes, and as they're going through the forest, they're cutting down these different things. That's what came to my mind. The sword of the Spirit is the sword that is guiding your path, and as you're walking, you're cutting down these different things that are in your way and making a path for yourself. But it's not you that's making a path for yourself, it's the Spirit that's making a path for yourself, that's making a path for you. And the sword, although it's sharp, although it's pointed, although it's not dull, there are certain things that it won't cut down because that's not the path that it has for you. Although the sword of the Spirit is sharp, pointed, and able, there are certain things in your way that it's not going to cut down because you're not supposed to go there. There are certain plans that God does not have for you. Certain programs that God does not have for you. Those are your schemes. Those are your plans for your life. You trying to take control over every situation. You trying to figure out where you're going to go. You trying to figure out who you're going to marry. What your life is going to look like in 5-10 years, even though that you don't know nothing. It's God that's guiding you. It's the sword of the Spirit that's supposed to be guiding you. Oh, that's... Oh, thank you, Lord. Thank you. But anyways, that's just sort of the Spirit. And I got time. I'll get that. I'll get to that later. There's another thing that Enduring Word spoke about, and it was saying basically this: the spiritual weapons are scorned by the world, but feared by demonic powers. And said this also: when we fight with the true spiritual weapons, no principalities or powers can stand against us. Let me give you another example. This image or this scene or scenario has been going on through my mind for a bit. And just this idea that what was I gonna say? Come back to me. Yeah. Prayer is I guess so. So truth. Well, let's just stick to it. What it says. I don't want to go into doing details, but truth. It's scorned by the world. Not all the world, but it's scorned by the world. But when you use truth, demonic forces have no power over your words now, because you're not telling lies. You're not trying to manipulate people. That's what the Corinthian Christians were doing. They were manipulating instead of telling the truth. Righteousness, being in right standing with Christ, knowing your identity, knowing that you have power, knowing that you're loved. And instead of looking to be in right standing with God, the Corinthians were using an image of success to validate themselves. I don't want to get too much detail with that because I don't know much about what the image of success that they were using, but image of success instead of righteousness. And instead of faith, putting their faith in God, they were using perceptions of power. Let's dive a little bit into that. But let me get some water first. Ooh. All right. Faith. Having faith in something means that usually you can't see it. Usually can't touch it. Usually not tangible, or it hasn't happened yet. Faith in things that are unseen, or believe in things that are unseen. And faith, again, I am no biblical scholar. I'm just sharing what the Spirit has guided me to share. Everything else I'm not going to say. Stuff about I'm not going to expand on. So if you have any questions, or if you have any thoughts, whatever, if you disagree with me, hit me up. I'd love to learn from you and what you think. But whatever. Faith versus perceptions of power. As we compare those two things, what does that mean? The perception of power that they were using was that they were all right, they were strong, they were mighty, they were in right standing with God, whatever, but they were wrong because they didn't have faith in God. So their faith wasn't the thing that was empowering them. The perceptions of power that they were using were what were giving them, what was empowering them. English is hard. It wasn't their faith that was empowering them. It was the perception of power that they thought or that they were upholding that was empowering them. So instead of, okay, trusting in the Lord in whatever situation that you're in, you're like, nah, I'm going to use something else. I'm going to use a smile. Bro, people be smiling and they're not happy. Then they mad, depressed, they're suicidal, a whole bunch of things. Everything in their life could be going wrong, but they still smile. Perception of power. Money, another perception of power. Happiness, chasing after experiences, could potentially be another perception of power. Fame, glory, whatever, could be perception of power, even status. So instead of having their faith in the Lord, it says the shield of faith. Shield of faith is supposed to defend you. Instead of defending themselves with the Lord and the faith that they have in the Lord, they're defending themselves with their own status. They're defending themselves with their riches. They're defending themselves with the things and the perceptions of power that they thought that the perceptions of power that they thought back then was going to sustain them, was going to defend and protect them. Y'all, if you have perception of power that you think is going to defend you, that's going to stop the enemy from attacking you, that's going to protect you from the arrows of the enemy, the flaming darts, as it was described, I think, in somewhere in the Bible, bro, that shield, which is your perception of power, is going to fail you. It will fail you, but faith in the Lord won't. All right. Ooh, salvation and lording over authority. I don't know about that, so we're gonna skip that. I have some thoughts about. I'm not gonna say nothing about that because I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. If you're gonna tell me something, I'm gonna tell you. And lastly, the shoes of the gospel instead of smooth words. There's this place where Paul, I believe, is talking about how, the strength of the strength of the gospel is more than enough. And I forget where it is. But he's just talking about how it's not his smooth words, it's not his articulate tone. That's not what's most important in sharing the gospel. That's not what's most important in bringing someone to salvation and bringing someone to trust and to love God, to put their faith in him. The gospel has power in and of itself, and it's more than enough. You sharing the gospel and you taking steps to share the gospel, those shoes on your feet to move and to share the gospel, that's more important than the smooth words. I've got caught up in this a lot of times, whether it's some of the evangelism that I've done, or even some of the people that I've discipled, or people that God has placed on my path to encourage, to empower, to remind them of the grace of God, to remind them of the love of God. I found myself, instead of using Bible, I'm going to put the Bible actually. Instead of using Bible, I'm using my own words. I'm using my own conjugations, whatever. And not to say that that's all bad, because Again, the Spirit in that moment could be saying, hey, Patrice, talk about this. Talk about your experience. Talk about this. Use this example to help them to understand. Use this tone of voice that's a little bit more firm. Use this tone of voice that's a little more soft and meek. But that's important, and that plays a factor into it. But sharing the gospel, that thing has more power and enough power to change someone's life. And it's not about your smooth words. It's not about your smooth words. So, mic drop. No, I'm not. It's not my mic drop to drop. It's God's mic to drop. So, Liddy, I wanted to share that. No, I didn't want to share that. The Spirit told me to share that. All of that. And let me go back to the imagery that came to my mind. You're in the forest again, and you're trying to carve out a path to destination. To destination. Where's your destination? My destination is the glory of Christ and Him coming down and walking in salvation and fixing my eyes on Him and His return and living accordingly. I don't know where your eyes are fixed at. That's on you to figure out. And that's on you to rectify and to change your vision, and to change your perception, and to change your goal. But as you're walking towards that goal, again, the sword of the Spirit, as it relates to human schemes and programs, I want to be very direct about this and very focused on this, because there could be other contexts, there could be other things, but I want to focus on, first off, what the Spirit is reminding me of. First off, what the Spirit is guiding me to say, but also as it relates to human schemes and programs. The sword of the Spirit is... I'll have to figure that out. The sword of the Spirit is like a machete or a sword that is sharp, not dull, and it will guide you as you swing it. It will guide you to where you're supposed to go, to the path that you're supposed to take. But guess what? There are certain things it won't cut. There are certain things that it will not cut. And it's because it's not supposed to cut those things. It's not supposed to cut those things. And again, that's not the path that you're supposed to go on. So, yeah. Bye. God loves you.